Good morning and welcome to another edition of Inside the FLX here on FingerLakes1.com and FL1 Radio. I'm Josh Durso, and our program today starts with a simple question. How much is law enforcement worth? In case you haven't heard, reporting out of Wayne County indicates that the sheriff's office is short a serious number of deputies, and its result could be a recipe for disaster. Union reps say the shortage is being caused by the deputies' inability to set a fair rate of pay. In a couple minutes, I'll be joined by Toole with Teamsters Local 118, who represents the deputies. He's going to help guide us through this story as we discuss some possible solutions. We'll also discuss the broader issue of law enforcement shortages during our conversation. First, though, a quick message from today's show sponsor, Medea, Miris, and Ricky, the Finger Lakes personal injury attorneys.
I was severely injured. I was on a ventilator. My husband was scared, and he just went for the nearest number that he had heard advertised over and over and figured they're the best. They know what they're doing. I think that's the typical reaction. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right one. And I'm thankful that we learned that early on in the process. He decided to look for someone locally who would give us a little more personalized attention. And when we met Steve and talked with him, we knew that we had found that person. If you want to feel like you have an attorney who's in your corner, who's going to listen to you, who's going to endeavor to understand you, give Steve a call. I really felt like everyone at Medea, Miris, and Ricky really cared.
For a law firm that cares about you, contact Medea, Miris, and Ricky at 315-568-0911. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome.
And welcome back to the show. I'm Josh Durso. This is Inside the FLX. I'm joined by Toole of Teamsters Local 118. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for asking me.
So obviously, let's get everybody up to speed first and foremost. How did we get here, or where do we stand right now in terms of this ongoing negotiation between Wayne County government and the deputies union?
Yes, Josh. Right now, as it stands, the county has declared impasse. They feel that there's nowhere else to go. They don't feel that they can make any more movement during negotiations, and they have filed with New York State to have a neutral party come in. But we really got to that point. We started negotiations in August. We had some exchanges of proposals. We had two separate negotiation sessions where proposals were changed. We made modifications. And on the third one, the county got up after about 5 minutes and walked out.
Got up and walked out. Let's dive into that a little deeper. What were the main circumstances or reasons for that walkout? Was it just outright disapproval of what was being put on the table, or is it just kind of frustration with what's been happening over the last several months?
Honestly, I think it was a premeditated move. I think that from the very beginning, the county's attorney, who was the lead negotiator, I think that he was pushing for impasse right from the beginning. I think that that's his style. I think he'd rather have a third party make the decision rather than kind of grind it out at the negotiation table. And that's hard work. He had made that position clear during phone conversations before our first meeting. He wasn't happy with our initial wage proposal. We modified it significantly on the second round. And we modified again on the third, and he just did not want to talk about it. He did not want to talk about other open issues, things that were important to the county, and he did literally get up and walk out.
So set the stage for us a little bit. Give us the comparison. So what is what do the numbers look like at other forces or with other departments in the area? Compared to what Wayne County, the Sheriff's Office, is currently setting at?
Absolutely. Currently, right now, we have about 45 to 50 police officers at Wayne County, sergeants, the road patrol that you see out there, and the criminal investigators. Currently, those men and women, the police officers make $26 an hour, and the sergeants make $29. If you look at Monroe, Ontario, Seneca, and Cayuga, as of 2018, their wages for a police officer, we'll keep it simple there, are anywhere from $30 to $31 an hour, almost $32. And if you go into Newark, which is just up the street from the Wayne County the government buildings, a newer police officer is at $31.60 and a sergeant's at $36. So we're talking anywhere from $5 to $9 an hour, which is $10,000 to $16,000 a year less.
And I'm sure the people who are listening right now can sort of do the math in their head and sort of imagine what kind of toll that would take on the sheriff's office itself as far as staffing goes. But What does that look like? Obviously, some reports last month, I think it was like a dozen full-time short or open positions, and then another half dozen part-time positions. Is that still fairly accurate?
That is accurate. That is the casualty here, because the wages have not kept up. Don't forget, this group has not received a raise since January 1st of 2015. But because of those lower wages, you're seeing a mass exodus of current police officers moving to other police departments, and you also have new hires that come in, they go through the academy, and then they immediately leave for greener grass.
And how much of the problem is that? Because obviously we've heard before, we've talked to folks, government officials here in Seneca County, because that was an issue here not too long ago where folks would be getting trained, employees would be getting trained here, and then as soon as the training is over, they're moving on to something else, somewhere else where the money is better. What kind of toll does that take, not only on the deputies who are, in theory, trying to plant down roots, plan their own future, but also the county as far as, what they're able to offer, and you have deputies working long hours, right? I
think from the sheriff's point of view, as an employer, dictated by the county what he can and can't do, I think it's got to be a hopeless, frustrating series of events. We're down 10 full-time police officers in Wayne County and probably 5 part-timers. To spend all that money, I think, I won't say the exact number, but I thought I read it was $300,000 or $400,000 in training for new cadets, and then having them leave for Irondequoit or Fairport or Brighton. I mean, that's just tragic. And the toll on our police officers is overtime. They have to cover those 10 shifts that were short. You need to have cars on the road, and the overtime is just out of the window.
I mean, in theory, that's like 400 hours a week, right? I mean,
it is.
At least. We
have 14,000 hours of overtime so far year to date this year, and that's 300 plus hours a month. And that's 15 to 20-hour days for some of our officers.
That is wild. Now, give us sort of a idea of how much time we're talking about. How long has this been playing out? How long has it been since, obviously, the deputies received any sort of pay rate or pay increase, but also how long the deputies now have been sort of pulling all of this extra overtime to compensate for what's lacking?
Right now, as I said, they received their last raise January 1st of 15. So you would work through that final year and prepare for negotiations probably in the summer of 2015. I believe they did meet with the county, their union that they had previously, which was a AFSCME, what they call Council 82. They're a national union that deals with federal employees and public sector employees. For whatever reason, they chose to make a change, and they went with the Teamsters in 2016, and Wayne County immediately challenged that, took us to court, felt that we weren't qualified to represent a public sector group, even though we represent over 1,000 different public sector, plus probably 5 or 6 of the highway departments in Wayne County. So we do have that experience. New York State finally agreed with the Teamsters, and we were part of that. So now we're almost 2 years behind with no raise, which is fine. The deputies understood that. We met with the group, and then we met with the county, and that's why we're at where we're at right now in 2018, with 3 years now without a raise.
So for those who might not be aware, walk us through a little bit what Teamsters Local 118 is, what the Teamsters are.
Yep, the Teamsters in Rochester, New York, are Local 118. We represent a little more than 4,000, maybe 4,200 members on 80 different companies. We represent a lot of truck drivers, naturally, UPS drivers, which are under contract right now, Wegmans. We have 1,000 workers at Wegmans between the warehouse and drivers. The brewery, everybody knows the brewery in Rochester. We have 300 or 400 workers there. Kraft Foods, where they make Cool Whip and Lunchables, we represent them. We have a school district in Greece, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, facility operations, and central office. I think with construction and lumber, we represent it all, liquor, beer delivery. So in many, many highway departments, probably 20-plus highway departments from Gates and Ogden all the way over to here to Sodas Point, Walworth. So we're very diverse.
So paint the picture for us. This scenario compared to some of the other representation situations that you guys have seen, is this really unique, or is this kind of the process, even though it's played out for now considerable amount of time. Is this a unique situation or relatively common in terms of what the representation looks like and how that conversation plays out?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's very unique when it comes to public sector, especially police departments and fire departments. I think that this is where we always end up. I think you'll see if you would go online and look that towns, cities, counties, they end up relying on the state to make those decisions. It is unique for me. This is the first time that I've had somebody declare impasse against me. I have a record of over 300 contracts I've negotiated in my career. I've never put anybody on strike. I've never had to declare impasse. I've never had to use a mediator. Our local, we're kind of what we call a getting to yes. You try to understand that there's give and take, and at the end, both parties should be happy. Maybe not as happy as they would like to be, but I don't think they did their homework here on me. I think if they had done it, they would have realized that I would have worked with them to resolve some of their issues in return for resolving some of mine.
So the give and take, I think it's worth diving into that a little more, especially given the way things sort of are in the public sector and the perception of how government operates. How important is that sort of back and forth and give and take and the conversation to a process like this, and just getting to a result that makes everyone maybe not completely happy, but happier than they were before the negotiations start?
And I think that's the point right there. I think if everybody walks away kind of sad that they didn't get everything, I think then everybody succeeded. Certainly with give and take, you have to understand with a public sector, there's budget constraints. A highway or a city or a town or a county, they're restricted in New York to a certain percentage cap on property taxes. There are other revenues that aren't restricted. A police department, you have ticketing and parking and bails and bonds and whatnot. In highway departments, you're paid to plow streets, belong to the counties or states. But you certainly have to look at all that, and a county needs to be flexible, or the employer, let's just say it that way, has to have flexibility to run their employees and their workforce. And I think that there's a marriage there in the middle that you can try to come to terms with.
So the one question that I have I think this is pretty unique Ontario County probably experiences it to some degree as well, but maybe they're a little more insulated. Wayne County seems like it would be particularly susceptible to losing employees to Monroe County, which I would assume would be a more you're talking about more money, I would assume. And I don't know the numbers, but I think that's probably what the perception is for some of the people who might be listening. So my question would be, is that something else that has to be thought about when you guys are going through negotiations, or even the county, when the county is thinking about how do we stay competitive with a county substantially larger like Monroe?
Larger, richer, Ontario, Monroe, or even internally the Fairports and Irondequoits and Brightons, which seem to be the biggest robbers here also. There's no shame to those towns and what they're doing. But you're right, it's not a brain drain, but it is a body drain from our end of Wayne County. We put the time and energy to train these young men and women, and then to lose them. But you have to bring those wages up. It's $31, $32 an hour for these other departments. You're looking at just bringing our people up, even with those counties you just mentioned. It's about 18%, but over 3 years. But it's 18%, and that's a significant amount of money for the average taxpayer to kind of look at.
And before we dive a little more into that aspect of it and how the union sort of interacts in this process, I'm very curious, the public reaction to this. Public safety is usually something that people are concerned about prioritizing, especially taxpayers. They tend to pay a good chunk of their tax bill every year to that. How is there frustration in the community with the fact that this is being drug out and sort of not getting the attention it seems like it deserves?
I think there is a lot of frustration. I think that the public, you're right, I think that they take pride in their local police force and that they have those people out there, pulling on doors in the middle of the night, walking up down the street, which they do in Wayne County, which I wasn't aware of in some of the other police departments. So there's still that old-fashioned kind of walk the street. It's the sheriff's directive. I think that they are frustrated by this. I think they are frustrated that we don't have enough police cars on the road. I believe the sheriff, when he ran for office, and I'm not going to be 100% sure, but in 2010, I think one of his main platforms, we had more police officers on the road, and he fulfilled that, but that was a bigger expense overtime wise, and we're seeing that now. And now he's coupled that commitment to a greater present or visibility with less people to do it with. So
now, obviously, a part of this sort of debate and discussion revolves around retro pay because of the length of time that the deputies have gone without a raise. Is that, do you think, one of the points of concern for county government? One of the numbers that's particularly large that they're saying, "Whoa, I don't want to necessarily pull the trigger on this one."
It is very large. If we were to receive what we were looking for in full, the retro pay for 2016, 17, and 18 would be insurmountable to the average person. But I have made that clear both to my rank and file and to the county, that the retro pay is a negotiable issue. If I can get the wages where they need to be today, no disrespect to them, but these folks haven't had that money. It's not in their pocket. So it's certainly something for us to use as a tool to try to get to the end. And that's kind of that give and take where everybody isn't happy. They may not be happy paying the wages as a county, and my folks might not be happy that they're getting that full, huge chunk of money. But in the end, we fixed the clear and present problem, which is the wages. So that is on the table.
So I want to ask another, one of the comments that we saw on social media while we were building up for this and sort of doing some research, one of the comments suggested that maybe some sort of phase-in system would be a smart way for the county to go here. Would something like that work, or would that just sort of kick the can down the road and continue to increase this problem of retention over the next, say, year to 2 to 3 years if it's something that's phased in a timeline like that? If
you're talking phase, and let's say my number of 18%, you said, well, what if, Chris, we brought them up 6% in 2019 and maybe 6 in 20 and 6 in 21, get the 18 there. Meanwhile, those other departments are getting their 2 to 3% raise, so we're going to catch up, but it may take a decade, and that drain would continue. So I looked at the phase-in. Had we had a shorter period, I would have looked at that too. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where we need to kind of bite the bullet immediately and then go from there.
So obviously, this whole thing, there's lots of options, there's lots of different discussion, but one thing that has been really apparent is that the sheriff's office is involved in a number of high-profile cases, excuse me, especially over the last year to 2 years. How much of a factor is that also been in what you guys are trying to negotiate for? While all of the, you don't just have the day-to-day policing, you also have these really high-profile cases that the sheriff's office is involved in. And all of that is tasking on the force, right?
I would say I'm not involved with the logistics there and how things are run. I guess I would say on behalf of the sheriff that the folks that he has working on these high-profile cases, he has all of the resources put into them. I think he has all his men and women helping out, cooperating. I think that they made tremendous progress, very successful outcomes to a lot of these things. So I wouldn't say that the lack of people is hurting those cases, but it's possible that dragging people into that kind of leaves them open somewhere else on the day-to-day stuff. But I would say that I couldn't speak to that. I think the sheriff would. And I think the sheriff would tell you that we're doing okay, and I would agree with that.
And he's going to be on the show in about a month, so we're gonna talk to him about that. But in your experience, what does sort of the management aspect of this look like for the folks who are going through negotiations like this? Obviously, the union handles or does the go-between work. But then at the same time, there has to be, that's always on the back of your mind, Historically, does that tend to, contribute to the way people manage in those situations?
I think you're right. As a negotiator, I try to do that. It may not be popular, but I always try to think of what the manager, what the employer is thinking. What is it that they need? What is it they want? And then try to come up with an answer for it when I'm looking for my demands. I think that both the sheriff and the head of the Wayne County Supervisors Board, Steve Leroy, have both made it clear that they need to pay these officers comparable with the surrounding districts and the surrounding towns. I think that from an employer, for the sheriff, trying to juggle 10 less people, trying to manage the overtime with the scheduling constraints that he has right now, I think that that's his number one priority to fix.
So as far as the union aspect of it goes, some of our listeners are probably thinking, well, why don't they strike? Well, why don't they do this, that, the other thing? You mentioned striking a little while ago. That's pretty rare now, isn't it?
It's rare in public sector. Some locals are maybe a little bit more militant, but with public sector, it's against the law in New York State. So there's no striking at all. Any strike that I would do, I'd be paying twice the damages every day for the local, and I'd lose my job pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So, and that's, for me, as a negotiator with private sector, I have that ultimate tool. I'll put you on strike. They can lock us out, so they have that. But in public sector, it's always going to be about talking, sitting down and arguing back and forth. And the county, through their negotiator, took that away from us by walking out.
How have unions sort of evolved over the years, just in terms of how they operate on a day-to-day and how they work? Is there more talking now than there was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, or is it less talking and more sort of email exchange or something else? What does that look like?
I think it depends on the union and the business agent. I think the emails, I love to use emails and that in between. That doesn't always work. The employers don't take advantage of that. We could have taken advantage of that here and we didn't. It is more talking. It's less banging the table. It's less, go to heck and whatever. Yeah. But yes, it is. It's more and more talking, and certainly with public sector, that is all it is. It's all about, you hate to say it like a Monopoly game, but you're trying to get someone to trade Boardwalk for Baltic Avenue and come out on top.
So let's talk about what's coming up over the next several months. What do you guys have on tap for, say, the next 2 to 3 months in this process? And what people might see if they're reading the newspaper or watching a program like this?
Well, we are scheduled to have a session of mediation with the state next Friday, so whatever that is, the 28th or 29th. We have all day scheduled. Both parties will be there, plus a neutral mediator, Maury Solomon, and Maury will come in and he will basically listen to both sides together, and then he will separate us and try to get us on our target, what we need, what they need, and he'll go back and forth between the rooms and try to beg, plead, and cajole all of us to see if we can come to terms. Honestly, I think this is a means to an end. I think that they'll go through the motions. I hate to say that, it's kind of negative, but I think they'll go through the motions and they'll at that point wait for the impasse, the arbitrator, to make that final decision, and that's pretty sad.
So obviously you kind of alluded to it right there, but the best and sort of worst case scenarios that could possibly play out over the next several months, just in terms of the negotiation and what it would mean for the sheriff's office as a whole. Yes,
it would. We would go through this next Friday, then we would then wait for probably January, February, schedule that with the interest arbitration and get that final decision. I would say that would be a massive failure on the county's point, because the only decision that the arbitrator can make is about wages. So he'll look at comparable wages to surrounding counties and other police departments. He'll see that we're correct. The county is very well situated financially, very well situated. They can afford to pay that. But their issues, scheduling, cannot be addressed. The only way it can be addressed is at the table with me. Mm-hmm. And that's where they failed when they walked away. And that is tragic for the county. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm not willing to talk about that next Friday, and I will. Mm-hmm. But
so possibly by next summer, this could all be behind the county and resolved?
This should be. I would say that, talking to our attorneys, that we would probably have a decision in May or June. Okay. So we would be done then, and we would have a 2 or 3 year agreement.
And
piece of the earth.
Yeah, so I have to, my sort of last question is, because these, like I said, these types of issues come up all the time. The negotiation is a completely normal process in the public sector. When you're talking to people who maybe aren't as plugged into the news or what's going on in county government, what is sort of the broad thing that you try to leave with those folks so that they understand what you guys are doing isn't sort of in a malicious way, or you're malevolently trying to like get as much money as possible or that sort of thing?
I agree with that. It is a fine line. What I tell people if they're saying, what is it you're asking for? Look, we're just asking. We're 2 or 3 years behind the 8 ball with the other departments. We're trying to catch up. We're asking for no more than what we're looking at in Monroe, Ontario, Cayuga, or Newark. We're looking so that we're all competing on a level playing field, so that when we train our officers, they don't leave, they stay, and everybody's happy. It's a difference on the color of the car, the color of the uniform, or the style of the hat you wear, but the wages and the benefits are the same.
All right. Well, appreciate the time. Appreciate you coming in to talk to us about all this stuff. It's complicated, but I think it's important to sort of understand the logistics of what's happening with public service like law enforcement.
Josh, I really appreciate the time here today. I'm very, very happy. Thank you.
All righty. Well, that's going to do it for us today. That's all the time we have. I'd like to thank Chris Toole of Teamsters Local 118 for joining us. Inside the FLX is available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. Check us out online at www.insidetheflx.com for a complete list of episodes. Download the FingerLakes1.com app for the latest news, weather, sports, and podcasts like this one. It's free and available for iOS and Android. Hey, I will see you back here tomorrow for another edition of Inside the FLX.